This is a current tense case brief presentation that examines the case R.V. Kersey 2015 ONCJ 208. Facts. On November 1st, 2013, a car accident took place on Country Road 18, close to the town of Kingsville. Olindo Lavoie was driving westbound on his way home from work at approximately 1 a.m. when all of a sudden he stumbled upon a car driving eastbound that crashed into him while attempting to make a left turn onto Graham's side. The two drivers were surprisingly uninjured, except for minor bruising due to the airbag on Lavoie's hand. Followed by the crash, Lavoie decided to check on the driver of the other vehicle. Upon approaching the other car, he found a woman outside crouching down on the driver's side. The woman's immediate reaction was to apologize to Lavoie, affirming she did not see his car coming, though later she admitted she thought she could make the turn before his car crossed the intersection. During the conversation that took place between the two drivers, the woman seemed intoxicated, something she admitted to herself. Lavoie called the police, and within 10 minutes they arrived at the scene of the accident. Officer D. Brown, the officer in charge of the scene, took the woman's testimony and asked her various questions concerning the accident. Her name was Miss Kersey, and she seemed quite disoriented and unable to answer questions concerning how the accident had happened. Although the officer and Lavoie did not speak to the woman at the same time, in fact Lavoie was not even present at this time, they both came to the conclusion that Miss Kersey was under the effects of alcohol. This inference was adequately made by Officer D. Brown after evaluating the odor of alcohol on Miss Kersey's breath, the unsteadiness on her feet, her slurred speech, and her confusion. As a result of the accident, on January 30th, 2015, Miss Kersey was charged with impaired driving and exceeding the legal limit of alcohol in her blood while operating her motor vehicle. Issues. Questions of fact. Number 1. At the time when the police arrived, there were only two witnesses, Mr. Lavoie and Miss Kersey. Is it possible that there might have been a third person who was in charge of driving Miss Kersey's car and that went unnoticed by both Mr. Lavoie and police officer D. Brown? In other words, was Miss Kersey really the person driving the car? Or did the driver of the car in question abandon the scene of the accident before being seen? Number 2. The police performed breath tests on Miss Kersey 5 minutes after arriving in the police station, approximately 1 hour after the accident had happened. The question is, were these samples taken as soon as practicable? If so, where was the accused and what was Officer Shaw, the officer who was in charge of Miss Kersey at the police station, doing with the accused during the time period of those 5 minutes before the tests were performed? Issue 1. Arguments and positions. Officer D. Brown's version. Although Mr. Lavoie never pointed the woman that was arrested as the driver of the car, Officer Brown testified she was the only person he observed at the scene, other than Mr. Lavoie. The totality of the circumstances made him confident she was the driver of one of the two vehicles. Mr. Lavoie's version. Mr. Lavoie never knew if the person who was arrested at the scene of the accident was really Miss Kersey. Although he testified that he would not be able to recognize the woman if he saw her again, he did assure the only other witness of the accident was a brunette woman wearing a short dress. Defendant's arguments. Mr. Lavoie never identified Miss Kersey to Officer D. Brown as the driver of the second vehicle, meaning the police officer could have arrested a different person than who Mr. Lavoie had spoken to. In addition, Officer D. Brown never asked Miss Kersey if she was the driver of the motor vehicle and never went to the vehicle to check if there was anybody inside. Defense submits the driver could have still been in the vehicle or had gone somewhere else. Issue number 2. Arguments and positions. Defendant's arguments. With respect to the exceed charge, defense counsel argues the breath tests were not taken as soon as practicable. Counsel submits there is a lack of evidence with respect to the time period when Miss Kersey arrived at the police station, between when Miss Kersey arrived at the police station and when the breath tests were performed. Defense counsel relies on the case R.V. Ortiz Ordóñez 2015 ONCS SC 280 to support his arguments surrounding this issue. Decision. Ms. Kersey was found guilty of impaired driving and was also found guilty on the exceed charge. Rationale. Based on previous cases such as R.V. Griffin 2009 SCC28, the court agreed that the only rational conclusion which could be drawn from the whole of the evidence was that the driver of the car in question was in fact Ms. Kersey. Considering the fact that Mr. Lavoie testified that the only other individual at the scene was a brunette female wearing a short dress, it is clear that the identity of this individual is Ms. Kersey. In addition to this, Officer D. Brown testified that upon arriving at the scene of the accident, he saw two individuals on the road. One was Mr. Lavoie, the other one identified herself as Ms. Kersey. The result of the first breath test performed on Ms. Kersey was 173 milligrams of alcohol in 100 milliliters of blood. Considering that the law requires the alcohol concentration in a driver's blood to be lesser than 80 milligrams per 100 milliliters of blood, it is clear that the accused was intoxicated and therefore impaired. It was decided that the breath tests were a legitimate proof, regardless of the 5-minute delay that was experienced before taking them. The Criminal Code permits an outside limit of 2 hours from the time of the offense to the taking of the first breath sample. The time of the car accident was approximately 1 a.m. Ms. Kersey's first breath sample was taken at 1:47 a.m., approximately 60 minutes after the incident. Furthermore, the Criminal Code states that there is no requirement that the Crown provide a detailed explanation of what occurred during every minute that the accused is in custody, meaning the 5-minute gap between Ms. Kersey's arrival at the station and the first breath test was irrelevant. Therefore, the police acted reasonably and the samples were taken as soon as practicable. Analysis. Personally, I am satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Kersey was the driver of the vehicle that caused the accident by crashing into Mr. Lavoie's car. I agree with the court's decision in that the only rational conclusion that can be drawn from the evidence is that the female whom Mr. Lavoie found crouching down beside the driver's car is the same person that Officer D. Brown arrested at the scene of the accident. The main reason why I believe in Ms. Kersey's guilt is because when Mr. Lavoie talked to the woman he found beside the car, she confessed she was the driver of the car and continuously apologized for her actions. She was brunette, wearing a dress, and visibly intoxicated. When Officer D. Brown arrived at the scene, he found Mr. Lavoie and that same intoxicated brunette woman wearing a dress. Although Mr. Lavoie never actually pointed at her to identify her as the driver of the car, I believe there is enough proof that in fact she was. Survey question. Do you think the court's decision regarding Ms. Kersey's guilt is justified? Thank you.